Hi everyone, welcome. Today we are having the conference or the lecture number 2 of this self-knowledge course. We're having the okay, I'm checking the audio here. And today as you can see, we are going to talk about the mysteries of death. And in the previous lecture, we were explaining what is this whole self-knowledge course about. We were talking about the 4 pillars of wisdom that we need to study in order to search or to find that source of inner wisdom that is inside of us, so we can get to enter into this mysterious world that can be called oneself. And today we have this topic. We are going to talk about death and why. Because if we really want to awaken our consciousness, if we really want to get to know ourselves, we need to get rid of many fears that we have. One of the greatest fears that humanity have is that of dying, that of death. And it is because of the ignorance of this, of what really happens when someone dies, when the physical body dies. And actually, when we are talking people about knowing themselves, about investigating, about getting out of so many concepts, those kind of fears like paralyze them. But actually, when we can get to really know what is really death, we can come to start understanding what really life is. And we are going to be talking about the whole process of death today. And the most important thing is that in the next topic that we are going to be studying in this page next Thursday, we are going to be talking about astral projection. And as in a conscious astral projection, we can investigate, we can corroborate the reality of all this information that you are receiving here in this lecture, in the previous lecture, and in all the lectures that you are going to receive in this course that consists on 75 lectures. And you can actually, through a conscious astral projection, investigate the reality of like everything in this world. So it is. This is a very interesting course. So I invite you to join us every Thursday and Saturdays to learn many interesting things, and receive many tools that will allow you to be able to get to know yourself, to get to achieve real changes in your psychology. So let's start with today's topic. And let's start talking about death. If you have any question, you can leave your questions down there in the chat, and we will be solving there any question that you have. The important thing is that this information remains as clear as possible. Okay, and let's start today's topic. And let's first remember something that we studied in the previous lecture, and is about the 3 parts that composed us. We were studying that we are made up of 3 parts: a physical body that is made out of matter, which is our human machine. It is the vehicle that is our consciousness right now using to have this physical experience, to manifest itself in this 3rd dimension. That is our physical body. But it is not everything that we are, because we are also a mind or soul, which is made up of energy that comprises 97% of our essence, but that is currently trapped within all of our negative ways of being. And we are also made up of a 3rd part, which is our spirit or consciousness, which is made up of light, and it comprises 3% of our consciousness, but it is not trapped by any, cannot be trapped by any part of our ego, because it is the immortal thing, in us is actually our portion of divinity, is our inner wisdom, is our inner guidance that is in every human being actually, and it is the one that we are going to try to awaken. And this soul, this 97% of energy, is the one that we are going to make the work to free and to awaken. And why it's important that we remember this? Because if we understand that we are not only this physical body, that we are also a mind or soul, and that we are also a spirit, that will help us a lot to understand what is that in us that dies when the physical body dies, and what is it in us that comes from one existence into the other, that goes from one existence to the other. Okay, and having reviewed this point, let's talk about death. Actually, the ignorance about death is the reason why most people is afraid of it, because they don't get to see, because of this fear, that death is like the final goal or the objective of everything. And we don't see that. We cannot see death as what is it really is, because we are totally fascinated with this physical world, because we forgot totally who we are, where did we come from. We totally forgot because our consciousness fell asleep. As long as we were creating our personality, we forgot that place from which we came, that same place to what we go every time that our physical body die, which is eternity. And actually we forgot that we are eternal beings, and because we don't remember that, that is why we are so afraid of that. And we are totally terrified about dying, because we have so many theories, so many concepts, that if you die, for example, you're going to, if you were good, you're going to heaven. But as we know that we are not like good enough, never, right? We totally think that we are going to hell to suffer, etc., and that hell is going to be eternal, whatever. But if not, you can believe that none of that exists, that there is not that such a thing as heaven, such a thing like hell, that we are actually gonna die and nothing else is gonna happen. We are just going like to disappear, because we are only this physical body. And the people who think that way, they are also afraid of that, because death means that you are going to stop existing, you're going to disappear, and that is actually something very frightening, right? And there are other type of people who believe that dying is just like changing dresses, that you die and you come again, and that coming and becoming is something eternal. But what is the thing, that we are not like sure about none of that, because those are theories, so those are only concepts in which we believe or not according to what we have been taught, or according to what sounds like more logical to us. But the important thing is that we really get to know what is death, that we get to investigate for ourselves what is really death. Because when you get to know, when you stop feeling fear about death, then you can like venture into the mysteries of death and life, and amazing things start happening inside of you. Okay, and what we need to start like studying and understanding is that we all are divine sparks, and that divine spark, that is what we really are, that is something like eternal, immortal, that have always existed and will always exist, came from a source. That source is known as God, is known as Allah, is known as the source itself, and it is known, and we are going to call it the sacred absolute sun. And when we come to this physical manifestation, and we come here to learn. We come here to actually forget that we are a divine spark, to forget that we are a part of divinity, to forget who we are, to experience all that we are not, to experience the ego, to experience the duality, okay? And the reason of that thing, of that entering into this wheel, which is the wheel of samsara, is that we, at some point, receive this information and we start awakening and we start remembering who we are. And from all that experience and from all that ego that we created, we can now extract all of the wisdom, all of the power, all of the virtues and faculties that are going to make our inner spirit, our inner divinity, to develop completely. And to, that is achieving the self-realization of our being. And to achieve that objective, which is the purpose of our very existence, we are given 3,000 opportunities in this wheel of samsara. And this means, these 3,000 opportunities means actually the creation of 3,000 souls. That is, we are given the opportunity to create 3,000 souls, to turn 3,000 times in that wheel of samsara. What happens that in that wheel of samsara that we are going to study like in detail in a later lecture, we go through the different kingdoms of nature, and once we arrive to the human kingdom in any of those turns, we are given 108 existences with human physical bodies, okay? That per each cycle, right? And if we make here the math and we say 3,000 cycles, right, times 108 human existence per each cycle, that means that we are entitled to the opportunity of having 24,000 human physical bodies in order for us to, in one of those existences, to awaken our consciousness to achieve the self-realization of our being. If we really understand this, and better if we can get to corroborate this information internally with our inner being, if we get to remember this that we have forgotten, then we are not going to be so afraid of death, because first we are going to understand that we are immortal, right? And that we have always existed, that we are not going to stop existing, that existence itself has like a higher purpose, and that we are going to return in the case that we die. We have died many times before, and that if we die again, we are going to come again to this physical manifestation, okay? And well, the purpose of living is to die. That is something that we must understand. And we are going to understand this when we start like studying the 3 types of death. Because we, for example, only know about the death of the physical body. But there are other 2 types of death, and there is a type of death that is the one that is going to free us completely. But what we need to know is that death itself is a process of liberation. The 3 types of death that exist are, for example, the death of the physical body, one kind of death that is known as the second death, and the psychological death. The 3 of them has the purpose of liberating us, because the death of the physical body is actually a process of liberation. We here, our consciousness, a spark here in this physical manifestation, is under too many laws. Here in this physical world, we are under 48 laws, and well, in contrast to the source, the sacred absolute sun, where only one law governs, that is, they are totally free. Here we are under 48 laws. But actually our psychology can be in lower in lower dimensions in our psychology sometimes, or like every time, because we are asleep, is under too many laws. So that is why we suffer. That is why we have crisis. That is why we have illnesses, etc. And when the moment of the physical death comes, actually what the person experiences is liberation. If you have the opportunity to investigate in a conscious astral projection, what is that you felt? What was the process the previous time that you died? You are going to see that when immediately the physical body dies, what you feel is like total liberation. The second death that we are going to study today also is also a process of liberation for our consciousness once we exhaust the 108 existences as humans in each cycle without achieving that purpose of awakening, of uh, uh, um, achieve the self-realization of our being. Then the nature makes this process known as the second death that we are going to study today. And that is a process of liberation for our consciousness, for all of the ego that we created during that turn in the wheel. But the death that is going to totally free us from the death of the physical body and from the second death is actually the psychological death. That type of death is going not only to free us from the death of the physical body and from the second death, but also is going to allow us to be born internally. And we are going to be talking like in detail about that also now today. So let's start like talking a little bit more about what happens when the physical body dies. Okay, it is said that a person died when the person completely loses his vital signs, when his heart no longer beats, when he gets cold. But it is important to understand that the person hasn't died yet, but that when someone supposedly die, actually he enters into a state of catalepsy that lasts 72 hours. Actually, there are many people, there are many stories of people who have returned from death during that time, and it is because yes, you can, everyone can have good return from death during that time. But right now, what people commonly do is that they go and make autopsies, or they bury the person during that period of time, and they like take away from the person the opportunity of returning in case they need to return. We are going to see that. Actually, before, I mean, the all the tribes and elders, uh, people in ancient cultures, they were aware of this process, and they actually waited those 72 hours before burying the person, because they know about this process. And nowadays, almost no one is aware of this. And we need to know that during these 72 hours, there is a process that is lived internally, and that we must wait that time when someone dies. Okay, the first thing, I mean, what happens during this process in these 72 hours is that the consciousness of that person, the inner spark, goes through a judgment process. And the first judgment that the person lives internally is lived during the first 5 minutes of this of entering this process of catalepsy. In this process, in this first judgment, the disembodied does like a conscious retrospection of each one of the things he did in his life from the very moment of dying and going back, you know, in retrospection till the moment he was born. That is why many people who have experienced who have had a near-death experience, they say that, for example, they saw their lives passing in a screen, like a movie, in retrospection, and they saw their whole life. That is why, because this is like the first judgment that the consciousness live. Another thing that commonly happens during this first judgment is that the person goes through a tunnel and they see like a light at the end of the tunnel. And actually, that is the process of our inner spark that is right now in this third dimension that in us has its seat in our coccyx, in the sexual center, or in the Muladhara chakra. And the sparks actually comes all the way through the higher dimensions that are here in the higher centers, through this tunnel that is actually our spine. And the light at the end of the tunnel that the person experienced are actually the light of the higher centers. And why is the person living this process? Well, for two reasons. The first one is so that the person is clear about all the acts of his existence, of the good and the bad acts of the existence, because you are going to be entering to another type of judgments and you need to be total aware of what you did. And the second objective of this first judgment that is made with our unconsciousness is that we can compare the lived existence with the plan that we had for this existence. Every time that we come to a new existence, we have like a plan for it. We have like something to achieve. For example, we have said that, well, in this new existence, we are going to eliminate all of these defects. We are going to awaken our consciousness. We are going to achieve self-realization, etc. And we are, when we die, we are going to experience if what we planned or what we have planned for this existence we achieved or not, or we were totally like far away from that. That is like the objective of this first judgment. After that, the soul is going to live a second judgment. And the second judgment is going to be in front of the regents of the divine law, which are already self-realized masters, 100% conscious. And this judgment takes place approximately 24 hours after the process of dying, which is after entering this process of catalepsy. And in this judgment, two things are going to be considered. They are going to weight the amount of psychological defects that the person had in that existence, and they are going to compare the weight of them with the weight those defects had at the end of their previous existence. For example, let's say that in my past life I had my anger, I don't know, this weight, this big, I don't know, and they are going to see the weight of that my anger have right now. As we are totally asleep, as we don't know ourselves, as we don't work on ourselves, it is very common that the weight is going to be increasing in every existence. So probably I had an anger this big in the previous existence, and now I have an anger this big because I'm all the time yelling, I'm all the time feeling resentment, I'm all the time feeling negative thoughts, feeling impatient, etc. And that is what they are going to see first, the weight of each one of our psychological defects. And the second thing is that they are going to measure the quantity of the psychological defects to see if they increase in relation to the previous existence or if they increased. Okay, so they are going to see like the weight and the amount of each one of our psychological defects, and that is going to be the second judgment. You're going to see why. And the third judgment, it takes place approximately 48 hours um, after the beginning of the process of dying or the entering this state of catalepsy. And in this process, the soul is taken to the tribunal of the objective justice, and this tribunal is made up of Anubis and the 42 judges of the divine law. Here you can see like a representation, an Egyptian representation of this judgment. That is when Anubis is taking the soul of the dead to the tribunal of the objective justice. And this is actually the most important judgment because the deeds will be seen here, if they are good or bad. Actually, intentions are not worth in here. Because we can have very good intentions, but the important thing is what we already did in our existence. And they are going to be measuring here, as you can see, the heart in one side of the scale, and in the other side is going to be Ma'at, which is the feather of the truth. And when they measure a heart, they know the good and the bad deeds that we have made in our existence. The good deeds are all the acts of charity, for example, and the conscious acts that we make. Every time that we help someone, I don't know, with shelter, with food, with any time of care, with health, or I don't know, psychological support or emotional support. But the most important acts are the conscious ones. The conscious ones. Every time that we take of our time to help others to awaken, to share with everyone the information, the tools, the techniques, so they can get to know themselves and to awaken consciousness, they are going to measure that or to take that into account here. And the bad deeds are every time that we let our psychological defects, that is our ego, to act instead of our consciousness. And those bad deeds are the ones that generate us karma, and we need to be paying that karma in the next existence. That is the importance of that of this third judgment, because it will define the karma and the dharma that we are going to be receiving in our next existence. And a third thing that is going to be measured here is the fire on our spinal cord. If you see that this guy here with the blue hair and the green face with this like matter, but he is actually the one in charge of measuring the level of the fire in the spinal cord, or the level of the kundalini, of the rising of the kundalini. And if you practice the suprasexuality, if you ignite the sacred fire of the kundalini in your spine, well, actually they are going to measure how long is it, okay? And at the end of this process of judgments that we are all going to live when we die, then they are going to like make the sum and the extract of factors. They are going to make like all the math here, and they are going to make a birth date. And in this birth date, they are going to determine various things for the next existence that we are going to see. First, the karma that this soul is going to endure in its next existence. So they are going to determine if we are going, for example, to suffer from such diseases, or we are going to be living this unfavorable situation, and that in order for us to pay for the karmic debts for every bad action that we did in our previous life. If, for example, I was a tyrant and I was, I don't know, harming people, and I was tyrannizing everyone, now I am going to come to pay for that karma, and I need to. And they are going to design they are going to make the electropsychic design of the new personality, And for example, in this case that I was a tyrant, in my new existence, I'm going to become with a personality that is like, for example, shy, that is someone that anyone can tyrannize, that in order for me to pay for the karma that I have. And they are going to also there say the dharma that you are going to be receiving in the next life because of your good deeds, right? If I was someone that was helping people, yeah, in a disinterested way, or I was teaching people to knowledge so they can awaken, etc. Well, if I die, if I don't achieve the self-realization in that existence, in my next existence, they are going to pay me for all of that with dharmic situations, you know, with I don't know, a good life, with for example, the opportunity to receive the knowledge to achieve the self-realization in the next existence, and etc. That those are the things that are going to be living the person in case he is entitled to another existence, in case he had he had another existence. If you already exhausted your existence at 108, well, and you are going to live a different process. And what happens when they give this verdict? Well, right now, the Anubis commands the angel of death, that you can see here, to cut now, yes, the silver cord that is going to detach that soul from the physical body. But what happens that when Anubis commands the angel of death first asks for permission to the divine mother of this person. The angel of death is never going to cut the silver cord unless the inner mother of that person, the inner mother is a part of our consciousness, if the inner mother authorizes that he cuts the silver cord with the ray of death, then he can take other like 24 hours to do so. But if the mother, for example, does not authorize that the ray of death, then the dying person must return to his body before these 72 hours. Okay, so that is the reason why it is important to come to the old customs and to wait to make a funeral of 72 hours, because the person can have the opportunity of returning in case his divine mother decides at any point of that process that he must come. Okay, all people that you know that they had this after this next near death experiences and return is because their divine mother made them return, okay, at any point of that process. That is why we must wait for all that. And at the end of all this process, if the divine mother already authorized the day of the death, the ray of death, then the silver cord is cut, and the person is detached from the physical body, and their three alternatives are open to that person. The first alternative is going to be given if that person hasn't exhausted his 108 lives yet. In that case, if he's already, I don't know, in his life 72 or 100 or even 107 and already have a 108 for that cycle, that person is going to the limbo. But if that person didn't work with the sacred fire, okay, has another existence but didn't work with the sacred fire, in that case is going to the limbo, and there in the limbo is going to wait for all the process to be given in this physical world so he can return, for the ones that are going to be his parents to meet, to have sex, you know, to the mother to become pregnant, in order to return. In the limbo, he's going to be there totally asleep, because the masters awaken the consciousness to attend these judgments. But after this judgment process, the consciousness falls asleep again, because the person didn't do a conscious work to awaken his consciousness, and he's going to the limbo to do the same as he did every night when he went to sleep. to dream there, to think that he is alive. Because, for example, when we go to limbo every night, we totally think that we are alive. That we are in the physical plane. We don't make ourselves aware of being outside of our bodies because our consciousness is asleep. And if we die that way, it's the same that we are going to be living there. We are going to be in limbo, now detached from the silver cord. So we are not going to return to the physical body in the morning. And we are going to be projecting all of our life there in the limbo, our house, our family, our job, etc. And we are going to be there like making these projections until the process of returning comes, until the moment of returning comes, okay? And when that moment comes, then the conscious master takes that soul and make it enter to the womb of the mother, to the body of the new child when the mother gives birth to that child. The second alternative is going to involution, which is the second death. This process is going to be given if that soul already completed his 108 existences in that cycle without awakening his consciousness, without working on himself, okay, without getting to know himself. And the third alternative, is going to be given if that person worked with the sacred fire and increased its level in relation to the previous existence. That means that, for example, if you already lived the life, 103, let's say, and you were working in yourself in that life, you were working in the supersexuality that we explained in the previous lecture, right? And you were awakening your inner fire and you were ascending your kundalini. If you die there, you cannot go to the limbo because the limbo is a very cold place. And if they sent you to the limbo and you already have the sacred fire, well, that sacred fire is going to unlit there. So you are going to heaven. What is heaven? Heaven are higher levels of consciousness, higher dimensions, okay? And if, for example, the person already exhausted his 108 existence, but he worked with the sacred fire, in that case, they don't send that person to the involution, but they give that person a life 109, so that in that life he makes the effort to make the inner work and to achieve the self-realization. Those are the three alternatives that are open to anyone in that point. And that is the whole process of the death of the physical body. And let's now see what is that of the second death, because the second death is going to be given with the second alternative. Remember, second death is actually the process of involution, and it happens when the spark already lived those 108 existences without self-realizing, or without achieving the purpose of the existence, which is awakening our consciousness, getting to know ourselves. And what happens there? That they enter towards a process of involution into the lower kingdoms of nature, and in that process the soul is going to pass through the 9 dentist circles. That is what people commonly known as hell. And hell is something real, but hell is not something eternal. Actually, hell are the lower dimensions of nature, the infra dimensions that are actually subdivided in those 9 dentist circles. The circle of the moon, the Venus, Mars, Saturn, Mercury, Sun, as you can see here. That is a process that we are going to explain later in detail in later lectures. And what is going to happen here is that as the person didn't do the work to voluntarily eliminate his psychological defects, because they are many, that make up their ego, to free their consciousness, to get to awaken the consciousness, then the nature is going to like burn, like to eliminate with pain, with many years, probably hundreds or thousands of years of pain and suffering. Each one of those negative ways of being are going to be destroyed there during that process, which is the second death. And we are going to be losing in that process the soul that we just created in that turn of in the wheel of samsara. And the spark is going to come out from that process of involution totally clean, without a trace of ego, without any psychological defect, but it's going to get out like totally innocent. It's not going to rescue any of the wisdom that was acquiring during the experience in this turn of the wheel. It's going to come out just as it came from the sacred absolute sun, with a 3% of consciousness and with a 97% of innocence. That in order to be connected again to the wheel of samsara, to make another turn in the wheel, to make another process of creating ego, having experiences, etc., until reaching the human kingdom. He is entitled 108 existences, hoping that in that turn, that spark in one existence makes the inner work to awaken consciousness. That is the process of the second death. And well, now let's explain the third type of death, which is the most important one, because it is, as I was saying, the one that is going to free us from the death of the physical body. And why? Because if we get to eliminate all of our psychological defects, to eliminate all of our ego, to rescue from that process of psychological death all of the essences that are currently trapped within each one of our negative ways of being, and we merge all of that essence in our spine in the process of the suprasexuality, the awakening of the kundalini, we are going to be creating the different bodies, internal bodies, the 7 bodies that we have. And we are going to become immortals. We are going to have full representation in the different dimensions of nature. We are going to become a totally enlightened beings. And as our essence is totally immortal, and we get to develop all of that, we are never going to die again. So we are not going to be, we are not going to pass through the process of the physical death and never again, because that type of death totally liberates us. And of course, it also liberates us from the second death, because if you in one existence, in this one, hopefully, make the work of the inner work of eliminating all of your psychological defects with the psychological death, then you don't need to go through the process of involution or through the second death for the nature to disintegrate your defects, because this death is going to liberate you completely. It's going to free you from the wheel of samsara, and it's the one that frees us from all the suffering, from all the misery, and from the constant slavery to which all of our different ways of being have subjected us. So it's very important that we understand what is the psychological death, because that is the tool that is going to allow us to free ourselves from the mechanics of this wheel of samsara. Now, what is the psychological death? Is first understanding that we are not one, but we are many. Inside of us, we have many ways of being. We have, those 7 deadly sins that are, the sloth or laziness, the lust, wrath, envy, gluttony, pride, and greed. Yeah, we all have that in our interior. But actually, those are just like the seeds of the ego that we have, because we have, or they have multiplied in us in many different ways of being that we have. Some of them are very bad, some of them are very good, but actually both sides are part of our ego. We have very good defects and very bad defects. And here you can see uh, like a representation. For example, we have the ambition, we have the scared one, we have the aroused one, we have the homosexual, we have the deception, we have the impatience, we have the depression, we have the egoist. We have many different ways of being, and actually, if someone tries to enumerate all of the psychological defects that he has, is not something possible. This poet from Mantua used to say, Virgilio used to say that if we had a steel plate in a tongue of iron, we neither that way we can enumerate all of our defects. That is because we have many ways of being, and the thing is that we learn how to start eliminating them, and we are going to do so by self-observing, by sending our attention constantly to our inner world to observe what is going on inside of us. For example, we are thinking right now something, but who is thinking there? We need to start observing our mind, because every thought that we have, there is a psychological defect thinking. Actually, when we think that we are thinking, we are actually listening to what in any psychological defect that we have inside is saying. For example, the anger can start talking right now in my mind. The greed can start projecting things on my mind. Lust can send me a lot of images to my mind. As envy can have me thinking about this and that. And when I am thinking, I need to be in self-observation to discover the psychological defect that is there, using my mind and using my mental energy so I can judge it, so I can get to comprehend what defect it is, if it is really a defect manifesting, or if it is my consciousness. And when you see that it's something that is there, just exhausting your mental energy, just thinking about ways of harming others or things that are going to end up harming yourself, you know intuitively that that is a defect. And what is the next step? Get rid of it. Because there, in that defect that is now expressing through your mind, giving you the opportunity for you to observe it, to get to see that you already have it, is a portion of your consciousness, of your essence trapped there, conditioned. And we need to eliminate it in order for that consciousness to be released. And how are we going to eliminate it? We are going to ask our Divine Mother to eliminate it. The same with any center that we have inside of us. We have, for example, here our intellectual or mental center, and there we are going to observe all of our thoughts. Actually, we have here like the hardware in our brain, but the software is here at the level of the heart in our spine. Here you have your mental center. Here you have your emotional center at the level of the what is it? The solar plexus, you know, at the level of the navel. There you have your emotional center, and you need to be observing your emotions, and you need to be judging what defect is there expressing itself in your emotion, making you feel like, making you feel dislike, making you feel fear, making you feel anxiety, making you feel anguish, making you feel sadness, making you feel this and that. Who is there? There, in that defect that is manifesting, is a portion of your consciousness trap. You need to judge it, and you need to ask your Divine Mother mentally. Once you already know it is a defect, you ask, my mother or Divine Mother, please eliminate it. And you imagine how this defect is destroyed and how your essence is liberated, and you can experience with that process the liberation. There, at the level of the sacrum, we have our instinctive center, And at the level of the coccyx, we have our sexual center. And at the level of the larynx, we have our motor centers. And I have here like an example that what you can find, for example, self-observing yourself, when you are, for example, walking down the street and you see someone that is attractive to you. Right there, the lust in you is going to like start manifesting in the different centers. So at that moment, if you are self-observing, you can discover in your sexual center that unmistakable sensation of arousement, of, that sexual sensation that you are experiencing. There is a manifestation of lust that you can judge and that you can get to eliminate. At the level of your instinctive center, you can start feeling like attraction towards that person. At the level of your emotional center, you can start feeling like those butterflies that are actually the defects of lust. They're moving, the emotional lust, and you can start feeling like if you are in love with that person that you don't know, that you just saw passing by, okay? And at the level of your intellectual center, you can actually observe how your mind is already projecting things, is idolizing that person, is imagining that you are already having sex with that person or that you are getting married with that person. All of those are processes that the defects of lust are generating in you in that situation. And at the level of your motor center, if you are self-observing, you can even hear all of the defects that are telling you to do this, to do that, to go, to tell her something, to, I don't know, touch your hair, to make a joke, etc. All of that is the process of self-observation. All of those things that you are observing are the psychological defects, are in this case details of a loss that are there manifesting. If you reflect, you can understand that these are defects, that they have a portion of your consciousness trapped, that they are there making you misuse all of your available energy every time that you see someone attractive on the street, that these defects are never going to allow you to achieve the virtue of chastity. But let's say that you are doing this of self-observing in a situation in which someone offends you. There you can, at the same point, discover several psychological defects that are manifesting, but now in relation to, for example, pride, or in relation to anger. If you are in a situation in which, for example, someone asks you to do something that you don't want to do so, there you can observe, if you are self-observing, how many details of laziness are manifesting there in your centers. And if you have the opportunity to observe a defect and to judge, to know that it is a defect, you have the great, marvelous opportunity to free consciousness, to liberate yourself from that conditioning, just asking your divine mother mentally to eliminate it. Yes, that's simple. You just need to try it. And well, that is the process of the psychological death. We must be practicing that from moment to moment. We must start living in a process of self-observation. We need to be all the time there observing who is acting instead of my consciousness, to eliminate it so my consciousness can start manifesting in me. If I can get to eliminate all of the defects or all of the details of my anger in a situation where anger commonly arises in me, as I don't have anger in myself anymore, what is going to express? Consciousness, patience, gentleness, etc. So we are going to rescue our consciousness, and our consciousness is going to start manifesting in us. And we must start also reflecting. We are going to be learning about reflective meditation, because in order to go deeper into our psychological defects, into the comprehension of our several psychological defects, it is important that we start asking the reason why we do the things that we do. Why am I thinking like this? Why am I feeling this? Why this defect is all the time making me do? What is the reason behind that thing that I am doing? How this defect makes me commit mistakes every time. If we start asking these kinds of questions, then we are going to be able to go deeper and deeper into a psychological defect, and we can eliminate them like more effectively. Okay, and well, that is the process of the psychological death. Is the one that is going to free us. So I encourage you to start practicing it. And now to finish, let's talk a little about what is that dies and what is that doesn't die when we leave the process of the physical death. Well, remember that our spirit, the 3% of our consciousness, which is totally immortal, never dies because it is immortal. So it will never gonna die. When the physical body dies, along with the physical body is going to be disintegrated our personality, which is like that facade, that image that we create with every time that we return, according to the things that we learned, to the family that we had, to the country in which we live, to the things, the customs of the culture in which we live. We create a personality, and that dies along with the physical body. But the consciousness, what we really are, never dies. So it passes from one existence to another. So what dies? The physical body, the personality dies, but the consciousness doesn't die. And our psychological defects, each of our negative ways of being, they don't die either with the death of the physical body. Why? Because inside of them, they have trapped a portion of our essence. Our soul is totally trapped into our ego. So our ego doesn't die with the death of the physical body. So we are going to return to a new physical body, and we are going to create a new personality with a new name, with a new surname, with new interests, hobbies, profession, etc. And as while we are creating that personality, that ego comes again and start entering again to the new physical body, because the ego doesn't die. When is the ego gonna die? If we work on ourselves, if we practice psychological death, it's going to die voluntarily, but and we are going to free the essence. But if we don't do that work, if we don't voluntarily eliminate them, they are going to die in the process of involution, or the second death. So now you know what dies and what doesn't die with the death of the physical body. And well, people, this is today's lecture. This is all about the mysteries of death. Remember that if you have any question in relation to this topic, you can leave your questions down there in the chat, and we will be gladly solving any question that you have, or you can contact us through the messenger of the page, and we will be solving any question. Okay, and I want to invite you to the next lecture, in which we are going to be explaining everything about the astral projection. That is a very interesting topic. We are going to be explaining what is astral projection. We are going to be talking about those misconceptions that people have in relation to this important practice. And we are going to be explaining the step-by-step to achieve a conscious astral projection with different techniques. So don't miss that interesting lecture. And well, thank you very much to all of you for attending this video, and see you the next time. Ciao.